For a fun and informative podcast all about training working dogs, look no further than the LWDG POD DOG. This weekly show is hosted by me, Joanne Perrott, founder of the Ladies Working Dog Group, and I chat to experienced trainers and experts in the field who will give you helpful tips and advice. Whether you're just getting started or you've been working dogs for years, this podcast will have something for you. So pull up a chair, pour yourself a cup of coffee and tune in to LWDG POD DOG. And let us help you build a better bond with your best friend. Hello and welcome to another episode of LWDG POD DOG. This week is our 52nd week, and that means that the podcast is 1 year old, which we are incredibly excited about. This week I am joined by the amazing LWDG group expert Clair and her amazing husband John Denia, and we're going to be talking all about 10 things dog trainers wishes you knew about training dogs. Before we get into that, how are you both today?
Fantastic, thank you, Jo.
Yep, very good, thank you.
Got a couple of days off, had a nice bank holiday, so yeah, we're raring to go.
Brilliant. Now, the idea of this podcast is to have a little bit of fun about it, but also to educate as we always do. So let's start with, what is the first thing you wish that people coming to you knew about training dogs?
Claire, you can start.
Okay, so the first thing that I personally would think it would be really useful for dog owners to know about dogs that they're going to bring into their home and train is the breed traits. So what it is they're actually purchasing when they pick their puppy. I truly believe that if more owners researched breed traits, what that breed was bred and developed to do, there would be far less not so good surprises when they bring their puppy home. But a lot of people, sadly, still really look at just the size and the looks of the dog rather than knowing and understanding the breed traits.
And I think dog breeds tend to go through what I would call fashions, don't they? Everybody wants this type of dog, then everybody wants this type of dog. And like you said, a lot of people don't really know what's going to end up inside of the puppy's genetics.
Absolutely. I mean, we see it an awful lot with people, you know, like you just said about trends and fashion with getting dogs. It become very fashionable to get working Cocker Spaniels and working Labradors. But those people, a lot of them don't intend to work them, and then maybe don't understand that they need to invest some time into appropriate training for that dog to fulfill its needs.
Yeah, those needs, they will drive some of the ways that you will train the dog, or things that you'll concentrate on early, because you know you're going to be competing with some of those breed traits later on. Far better to have laid the groundwork so that you don't have to fix a problem later, than to just suddenly let the dog start guarding, start herding, and wondering where the hell that's come from.
I think with the whole idea of having a working dog was the fact that COVID made everybody go for a walk outside. They went for a walk outside and decided we are now an active family. And as an active family, we need an active dog. But I think they sort of forgot that pretty much every other dog in the world is also an active dog. It didn't need the word working before it, did it?
No, exactly.
Okay, so that's our first sort of thing we wish people knew. What is our second thing?
Your dogs don't have an ego. So training will take as long as it takes. There are so many variables there. The breed of the dog, the owner's experience, the environment that the dog is growing up in, they will all have an impact on how long something takes to train. Number of times we get asked, well, how many lessons will I need? We can certainly make improvements during a lesson, but the majority of the improvements will happen at home in between. So they have a limited amount of time with us to achieve that. As long as your dog's enjoying the training, it takes as long as it takes, and the dog will get there. If you get frustrated with them because they're not learning quick enough, they just won't get there. It's like having a child trying to teach them to read or write. You don't discipline them or tell them off for trying to learn something and being a little bit slow at picking it up. You make it fun and you keep them going with it.
Do you think that's the case though? Like, as humans, we understand, or I hope most of us understand, that there needs to be a commitment to lifelong learning, to grow, always to develop, always to improve. Do you think that people take on dogs and don't see that a dog really needs that type of investment in it as well?
Yes, certainly. I don't think people get the idea that dogs learn from life. Any experience they have that benefits them in some way, shape or form, which might not be a benefit for us, there will be a light bulb will go on your dog's head. And all of a sudden they have, this is a great idea. I'm going to do more of this. Very much unlike us, where we decide if we want a pay rise or we want to learn a new skill for a project or something, that we go out and actively try to learn something. Dogs will just learn on the fly. Everything that happens, any experience they have, they will pick something up from that.
And they are so quick to learn, aren't they? I think I watch mine sometimes, and even bad behaviors, they will pick them up pretty quick and they become habits pretty quick.
Especially bad behaviors. When you think of what a bad behavior is from our point of view, it's just something we wish the dog wasn't doing. From the dog's point of view, there isn't really good or bad. I don't believe there's many dogs that are actually born evil. There's something in it for them that they learn. And it's worthwhile for them. It's just us that has that view of it's being a good behavior or a bad behavior.
That's really, really true. And it is usually something that accidentally happens on a walk once, and the dog then remembers that. They really do remember locations and things that have happened that they found self-rewarding. And the owner's like, it only happened once, and now the dog wants to do it again. It's because the dog found it rewarding. So we have to translate that over into training, don't we? If the dog finds something rewarding, then we're going to want to do more of it.
I only ate chocolate once, and now I've ate it every day for hundreds of years. Okay, going on. What is our third thing?
So the third one that I'm going to mention is leave your dog wanting more when it comes to training. People tend to really overtrain and stop when the dog gets bored or when the dog is losing motivation. I think if you always stop when your dog's really enjoying it and reward them for that behaviour, and then give them a break or finish for the day, the dog is left with this really nice, rewarding feeling about that training session. And they're going to be much more likely when you pick up again the next day or 2 days' time, whenever you train again, much more likely to be really in the game straight away, because you've left them wanting more. And it's really valuable with retrieving. So when I work with reluctant retrievers, which is one of my passions, when I work with them, I always say to the owners, you've got to leave the dog working more. Don't leave the dog wanting more, sorry. You don't want to kind of like push it. Oh, that was so good, I'm just going to do another one. And then the dog goes off the boil. It's a mistake people make in training a lot. For me, always leaving the dog wanting more is going to give you a better success rate, and you're both going to enjoy your training sessions much more.
Yeah, there is such a thing as it's called latent learning, and it's where your dog goes off and they have time overnight or between your training sessions to actually ponder what went on. If you imagine you taking a lesson in something, quite often it goes in one ear and you do it, and then it goes out the other ear, and afterwards you're not quite sure what's happened there, and it takes a bit of processing in between to actually get it, rather than kind of following instruction bit by bit, which is exactly the same as with dogs. We can put them through the motions, but in between there's going to be a period where your dog's going, okay, so why did I get that biscuit from you? Why did this happen? And they're learning what actions produce those consequences.
I've talked about this before, even with my dad. He would actually physically train one for maybe 10 to 20 minutes. It would sit potentially watching another 4 train for maybe an hour whilst he's watching. And he'd always say to me, whilst they're watching, they're learning. And then I think for such a small amount of time, experienced trainers tend to get so much out of a dog and train them so much. But when we are new to it, we tend to think, slog at it, repeat. And there is an advantage to that, but it is what you're saying is the time we ask the dog to repeat something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also with some dogs, my youngest, Rose, for instance, she will train beautifully for like 20 minutes to half an hour. If I try and push it more than that on a one-to-one basis, she starts to feel a bit, you can see she's just like, the brain's done. Physically, she could do more, but the brain's done. Whereas Indy can train for longer than that. Yet if you put Rose into a group class that was, say, an hour long or an hour and a half long, because it's a group session, there's a lot more breaks, so she can handle longer. So yeah, absolutely that.
Okay, so that's our point 3 on our 10 things. What is number 4?
So on a very similar vein to that, quality training is always going to be better than quantity. When you train quality, you're building perfection into the dog. You're training things purposefully so that the dog does it step by step. They learn muscle memory, good habits. When you teach using quantity, all you're really gaining there is experience. And that experience can be good or bad. If you're repeating the same thing over and over and it's not brilliant what you're doing, the dog's going to become very, very adept at doing something badly. So far better quality over quantity.
And that's the importance, I suppose, of us going out and having a plan at the beginning of our session as well, isn't it? So that we are not just doing stuff for the sake of it.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, always have a plan. And it's one of the things that can be very useful about finding a good trainer. You're not always repeating the same thing. They've always got new ideas and little things to leave you with, as much as anything to inspire you to go away and do that little bit of quality work, rather than, as you say, just going through the motions over and over and finding that what you're doing is quite sloppy.
Yeah, and I also think when going to see a trainer, they help you to stretch your learning. So not take it too far, so you're overwhelming yourself or the dog, but taking it past the level you are. Because it's very easy if your dog is good at something to just keep on doing the same things because it's easy to do. There's no worry for the dog, there's no worry for you, but it's not getting you to develop, to stretch, to get that dog to improve.
Sometimes a dog needs to make a mistake to learn, if that makes sense. But as long as you don't let them keep repeating that mistake, that's the key. So making mistakes isn't a bad thing, but repeating mistakes is a bad thing.
Okay, so that's our number 4. What's our number 5?
Okay, number 5. I think this is a good one. Number 5, I wish that all owners would understand the benefit of telling the trainer the truth. So what I mean by that is, don't hide things from your trainer that are happening with your dog. Don't give us a half story on what's happening with your dog, because for a trainer to really help an owner with their dog, we need to know the full picture. So if we're not getting that full picture, we only have to work with what we've been told. So if we've not got that full picture, it restricts how much help we can give. And on the same coin of that, these two things are the same. When you're then given that advice, that program, that structure, that exercise by your trainer, you need to do the whole thing. You can't pick little bits out of it that you want to do and leave other bits out, because that's not how it works. So for me, getting the full picture from the owner and then me giving the owner all of the information they require and then them following that process, that is a really, really important thing that I think owners need to understand. A trainer is only able to help as much as you allow them.
It is very easy to turn up, especially if it's a new trainer, and they say, what's your dog good at, or what's your dog not so good at? And you are slightly, I almost think, or for me, you'd be like, oh my God, I don't really want to tell them how bad this dog is. But I see what you're saying, absolutely. If you at some point, even within a couple of minutes, they're going to see whether you're telling the truth or not by the dog's behavior. So you might as well turn up, tell all, and then work from there, because that trainer is there to help you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really difficult to help a client fully if we're not given all the information to work with, So a little example of that, if people's recall is breaking down and they don't tell us that the recall is breaking down out on walks, and the dog then suddenly starts exhibiting behaviours in the one-to-one or the group class, and we're looking, thinking, have a feeling something else is going on here. So you start trying to get that information from the client, and you say, does he ever ignore you when you're out on a walk and you recall? Or in the garden, does he ignore you? Because these things generally don't just happen. They normally build up, and they start usually somewhere in the home. So getting all of that kind of information is just so important. So it's better not to hide things from your trainer and to tell them what's going on. But as I say, it's really, really equally so important when you're then given the training techniques, the exercises and the advice to modify behavior, or to train a new behavior, or to teach your dog something new. You can't just pick and choose from pieces of it and go, well, I don't want to do that piece, but I will do this piece. You're not going to get that result if you don't follow it.
There is a caveat to that, though, I suppose, as well, because I found for me once or twice that something that the dog can do perfectly at home in its own environment. I've gone to see a trainer and they've gone, can the dog do that? I'm like, yeah, the dog's fine on that. And then the dog makes me look like a total ass because it completely doesn't do it. I'm like, I swear that dog normally does that.
That's really common, but it goes both ways. Some dogs are really good at home, but naughtier in a new environment or at the training environment because they're showing off in front of the other dogs or something like that. Other dogs are the opposite.
They're actually much harder to help, because if we don't see a behavior, we can't start to find out where it's going wrong without a lot of questioning and good answers from the owner. And sometimes they can be conservative with the truth, or they just tell us little bits and pieces. So sometimes we end up trying to treat a symptom without knowing what the root cause is, because we haven't got that information. The other thing with people not telling you exactly what's going on there is quite often then the problems exist for a long time and they become ingrained. It's much, much harder to deal with at that point.
We see it sort of within the LWDG as well, when there's like master classes. When I look, I can see which sections, which chapters have gone in, and if something's completed, and I think it's almost our nature, we just tend to not complete. People like picking bits out, like pick and mix. And I'm like, you needed to really watch that bit and that bit for that bit to make sense. So it is important, if you're going to commit to something, to see it through, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Very. Because otherwise what happens is the client doesn't follow through with all of that, and they don't get the full result. So they think that actually that didn't work, but it's not that it didn't work. It wasn't actually done properly or given the full time to change that behavior or to train that new exercise or whatever. It's a process.
And just for anybody that does go along to a class and their dog absolutely behaves like a dick at that point, shows them up, don't be embarrassed by it. If you've got a good trainer there, they will be able to work out what's going on just through a series of questioning, and they will believe you if your dog is doing all the right things at home. And it's probably that your dog just needs to proof those behaviors in other environments rather than they can't do it and you're blatantly lying to them. There is a difference, and with a few questions you can normally see through to see what the truth is underneath.
Did John just make our podcast explicit?
Yes, he did. You said dick.
Okay, on to thing number 6.
Yay, thing number 6. Equipment can help you to control your dog when you're training them, but the equipment doesn't actually train the dog. So just putting a harness on a dog doesn't stop your dog pulling. It teaches the dog how to behave on a harness, but only if you put in the work to teach it how to behave on a harness. So you want to make sure that whenever there's equipment involved in it, it's just a means to an end. It's not something that does the work for you.
I think me and Claire and some of the other experts, we've talked about this at length, isn't it? People's perception of a tool, of an piece of equipment. It is never the tool that causes abuse. It's how we use that tool.
Yeah, every single piece of equipment can be good or bad depending on how it's used or how the dog views it. You know, I know plenty of people that really want their dog on a harness, and the dog is terrified of the harness, yet they keep trying to put the dog on the harness because they've been told that that's the better way to do it. The dog is terrified. So how's that better?
I will openly hold my hand up. In Wales, the use of an electric collar is banned. So it's not something that I've ever used in training or seen used in training locally to me. And I wasn't really against them, but I didn't really see the benefits of them in any way until on one of the podcasts we were talking about an electric collar had been used as a vibration collar with a deaf dog. And I was like, it really opened my eyes up to seeing what we're discussing here. You cannot hear or think about or listen to somebody's using X, Y, and Z and judge it without understanding how they are using it, why they are using it, and what the purpose of it is.
Yeah, and it's the same with even things like food. When we use food to train a dog, we're using it to show the dog what we want, to guide them where we need them to be. The food isn't training the dog. When you take that food away, the dog should still be able to do those things. It's a piece of equipment that's used in that piece of time just to control the dog or to help them to learn.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's like slip leads, isn't it? You know, I use slip leads on 99% of dogs. And a slip lead for me, when used appropriately, is probably one of the gentlest ways of teaching a dog to walk nicely on a lead. We explain all the time, if you look at a flat collar, but again, it's not about the equipment, it's about the use. So a flat collar, if a dog does pull into a flat collar, all of the pressure is in one area. I'm pushing, that's why my voice went funny, because you can't see me because it's a podcast. But a flat collar obviously will put pressure onto one part of the throat if the dog pulls. Now, obviously, if you teach the dog not to pull, a flat collar is not going to hurt the dog. But if you've got a dog that does pull, a flat collar is going to put pressure there. That's when you get that kind of gagging sound. So a slip lead, if you have a dog that pulls maybe mildly and we want to teach him how to walk correctly, a slip lead will dissipate. I can't say that word. Can you say it for me, John?
No.
Dissipate the pressure. But again, it's all about the use of how a tool is used, not the tool. And you're right, Joe, what you said about e-collars. Personally, we've never used one. I can't ever foresee myself using one. But the reason I would never say I will never ever use one is because I might not have met that dog yet, or I haven't worked with that deaf dog where actually I use the vibrating, you know. So I think you have used vibrate on a deaf dog, haven't you? Yeah, John has. So you know, I haven't, but I think this is the thing, we have to be open-minded to see that it's the use of everything, not the tool.
Okay, so that is our number 6. What is our number 7?
Okay, number 7. I'm going to mention this one because it's one that comes up in so many conversations, and it's actually quite a big subject. Socialization doesn't mean letting your dog play fight with other dogs. I have to throw that one in there because it's still, even though we educate on this so much and other trainers educate on this so much, there's still this huge misconception that socializing your dog means that they have to play fight, which is essentially what it is, with every other dog they meet. And it's just such a massive issue. And it is such a big reason, a big cause for some of the behaviours that we see in dogs through adolescence and into early adulthood, which could be avoided. So it has to be thrown in there. Number 7.
This is one of our bugbears, isn't it? Because we see the ladies who do it correctly and get so infuriated trying to take their dog into new environments to train them because there's somebody screaming, "My dog's friendly," as it boulders up to them and spins their dog over and causes massive issues within their dog that's doing really well.
Yeah.
But also because if you go to these places, the dogs that are allowed to fly around, whatever breed they are, there is always a large percentage of dogs who are terrified, and their owners are like, "Oh, they love this," and I'm like, "No, they bloody well don't. If we're going to go explicit, we might as well go there. You've already done it, John, so we'll keep it going. It's just like, what do they think is going to come from it? Now, coming from a background where we had large numbers in kennels and all used to go together, they would be rough and tumble, but nothing aggressive. They would have almost what I would like to call a pecking order. It would change as different bitches come into season. It would change when younger dogs got older. It was always changing, but it was never aggressive, never. But I never ever saw what I see when I go in a park, which is like dogs licking their lips, terrified, they're upside down, people are laughing and joking, not even paying any attention to dogs at all. And I'm just like, please, for the love of God, will you put your dogs back on lead and save them?
Yeah, it's actually quite heartbreaking to watch, and I feel the same when I go to a local park and you walk through. You will always see one dog being bullied, another dog being a bully, one dog hiding behind its owner, and the owner's trying to push it out from behind its legs to go and play, because that's apparently what we should be doing. And the dog's begging the owner to rescue them, and the owners don't advocate for their dog, so they end up with a dog that becomes fear aggressive. We get dogs come to us that have frustration on the lead, because as a young puppy they were allowed to pull their owner toward every single dog and person, and then when the dog weighs 20 plus kilos and the owner starts saying, well, no, you can't pull me, all of a sudden the dog gets extremely frustrated, so you get vocalization and lunging and all of those things. The dogs are just not learning the right things. For me, socialization with people and dogs should be polite meet and greets. It should be done in a way where the dog learns how to behave around people and dogs, not a free-for-all, and certainly not a dog being beaten up and bullied or another dog bullying. It's just really sad to see.
Socializing is one of those things that people don't really think of as training. People think training is teaching your dog to walk on a lead, what a recall command means or what a whistle means. But a lot of product of what your dog becomes is what you do in between those sessions, how you let them behave, what they get up to. Certainly socializing the dog incorrectly can lead to a dog which has a much harder time recalling, because it's now obsessed with other dogs. So you can't get the dog to come away from another dog, or the dog runs up to other dogs regardless of what you want and comes away as they're good and ready. And that's just one example of the things that you do between your training sessions, where you think you're actually training, or actually your dog is learning all number of things that are going to affect their behavior in general.
Yeah, because it doesn't take a dog a lot to learn. If I stay about 4 foot away from my mum or dad, they never catch me. Like, that is literally, they'll come one day, they'll recall, you'll see them in the park or wherever, they'll recall to like 4 foot, and then it's like, and then that's an entire game for them, because they're like, ha, you're not getting near me. And I suppose people don't know what they don't know, and when you start out, you read all about it, and with the best intentions, you take them along to like puppy meetups and puppy socialization and things that are put together by, and I will say it, by maybe trainers who are not thinking of the best interests of the puppies in the way they're running them, because they're not running them in the way we're discussing, with polite meet and greets, making it very, very calm, teaching the new owner what they should be doing. It is a case where those dogs are then taught to just be anywhere other than with the owner.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really sad.
It is something I know, like we've like talked about this point a little bit, but I also think as well, it's the same way. I understand that a lot of people going to work need to put their dogs into something like dog creche or whatever it's called, but it's looking at how they run them as well, isn't it? Because it can be the same, free for all in a little soft play where dogs are getting bullied, dogs are not getting what they need to feel comfortable for 8 hours a day.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many services you can pick and choose from now. Like, we actually have a couple of our clients that train with us with their dogs. They run dog walking, pet sitting, and drop-in services. Drop-in services are brilliant because somebody comes in, checks on your dog, stays with them for whatever the agreed amount of time is, lets them out for a toilet, but maybe that person isn't a trainer. So unless you actually ask for a dog walk, you're not going to ruin any of your dog walking by doing a drop-in, are you? So when people sort of say, oh, my dog walker lets my dog pull, so it's breaking habits. If you get somebody to do a drop-in service a couple of times a day, the dog doesn't need to go to a full daycare. Dogs should be trained to cope with being on their own, and that's another subject which we're not on now, but they should. And then if the dog is trained to be able to cope with being on its own for periods of time, then a drop-in service is perfect, or even a walk, a dog walk. But personally, I think the drop-in services are brilliant.
And if we look at their behaviour in the home, they pretty much want to sleep all day. So them being there with somebody just checking up on them, just making sure they're okay, is probably far more comfortable for a dog than having to be on its guard for 8 hours while surrounded by a load of dogs it doesn't know.
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay, that's putting the world to rights on socialisation. But shall we now go on to point 8?
Okay. Your dog will not hate you for saying no to them. Education is completely different to abuse, neglect, or deprivation. Your dog has to learn what's right, and they also have to learn what's wrong. And the only way they can know that is if you tell them.
I love this one too, and I'm sure this will turn into a small rant because we tend to be passionate about certain things. As the years have gone on within the LWDG, I don't think that we've changed in any way our friendliness, our welcoming of new people, of wanting to help them learn. Again, they don't know what they don't know. And there's a lot of things out there at the moment pulling for people's attention. This is the correct way to train your dog. You go on YouTube, there's about 50,000 videos on how to teach a dog to sit. But I think this concept that we can never say no is actually detrimental to the dog in such a big way.
Correct. There's always going to be more than one option open for the dog. The dog at some point has to choose the right path. Now, if they're not going to choose the right path, the only option that you have after that is management, keeping a lead on them all the time. So you have to teach them that this is correct. And as long as you do this, everything's happy and we carry on as we are. But if you go to do this, you're wrong. I'll tell you that you're wrong. And I make a big deal of when I'm with a client of not telling them how to do that. They will often say to me, well, how do I say no to the dog? And that's going to come down to the relationship between them and the dog. I can give them a few suggestions, but I can't tell them exactly how to say no to their dog.
If you think about it, it's a little bit like, I don't know, the police coming up to you and arresting you and say, well, I'm not going to tell you what you did wrong, but you did something because, you're now in cuffs or sort of back on a lead or whatever. But I'm not going to tell you, try and work it out, fella. And you'd be like, well, I've done 100 things this week. Which one was it? So I think that if we don't tell the dogs what it is that they're doing wrong and help them to understand, it's really, really difficult for them to know how to behave around us.
Yeah, and when I, like John, very much so, how you say no to a dog will vary greatly from dog to dog. Every dog is so different. But if I'm in a one-to-one with a client and clearly the dog is making a lot of mistakes and the owner looks really baffled, I'll give them options. I'm like, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this. And they're like, is that telling my dog no? Is that a correction? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, oh, wow, is that all I've got to do? I think they just have it in their head that saying no means being really horrible. And it doesn't at all. And then they look really shocked when I say, this is how I appropriately correct a dog on a lead. It might look like this, or it might look like this. And they'll go, oh, my dog looks absolutely fine with that. And I'm like, of course they do, And I think leading on for what John's saying there about, your dog's not going to hate you for knowing no. I think a lot of dogs are very grateful when they're finally told what the boundaries are, because then you can live a much more harmonious life and the dog has more freedom. That's the bottom line here. We can't give dogs freedom if they don't understand.
There has to be a more of a way, doesn't it, in society that saying no is some sort of form of abuse, because we have no problem whatsoever in our schools, in our homes, everywhere, saying to a child, yes, you can do that. No, you can't. It's the same thing. It's no means no. It's not a negative thing in our human life. I don't understand why it's become a bad thing in our dog training life. No is an absolutely perfectly acceptable thing to tell a dog.
Dogs say no to each other all the time. Dogs do not live the way that a lot of people are now saying that we should train a dog. Dogs are not like that. If you watch dogs together, dogs tell each other no.
Do you think it's a case of we are trying, I want to say humanizing dogs, but it's not even that, because like I said, we tell our children no, and we tell our husbands no, and our wives no. So I don't understand completely the relationship that's sort of being encouraged between a human and a dog, where it's just so unbalanced, isn't it?
I genuinely feel, and I know we've spoke about this a lot of times, and it's something I talk to John about and I talk to you about as well. I genuinely feel there is still, because there is still abuse out there in the dog training world, there is. I think people are then drawn in to feeling like they have to do it completely the opposite way, because the alternative is that, without actually logically sitting down. And I say to clients all the time, apply common sense and you won't go far wrong. Be fair to the dog and apply common sense and you won't go far wrong. But it has to be fair.
We have, like, if you're listening to this and it's your first podcast with us, there are loads of podcasts on topics that will help you learn about this. We've got the Loaded Choice, which talks about, giving dogs options, constructive correction. But in probably every single podcast, we talk about this in some way. But I do think as well that going forward, we all have to start, like, not standing up. It doesn't need to be a revolt, but we do need to say, actually telling dogs no is not a bad thing. There is almost a fear within the community to say, I correct my dog because of that abuse. But there's abuse in the human world that doesn't stop the rest of us throwing logic out.
Absolutely.
Okay, what is topic number 9?
Number 9, that's me, isn't it? If you find the right dog trainer, and that's always going to be the thing, find the right dog trainer for you. Understand that your dog trainer genuinely will be caring about your relationship with your dog. So this does pick into all the other little ones that we've said already. We genuinely care. So the advice that you're given is because we care about the relationship between you and your dog. We want the relationship between you and your dog to be better, to be one that's harmonious. And so always think about that. It kind of goes back to what I said about one of the other top 10, where I mentioned about when we give you a program or a training exercise, you can't just dip in and out of it because you won't get the full results. So you always need to kind of bear in mind that your trainer, if you've got your right trainer, your trainer will give you the advice they give you because they genuinely care about the relationship between you and your dog.
You must, form a huge bond with both the owner and the dog because they're in your lives weekly. Is it hard to see when people aren't taking that on board?
Yeah, it's really, really, really hard, especially when certain things can be fixed very quickly and effectively, or you see an owner struggling and you see them emotional about it, because they're struggling. And so you're trying to give them this advice and maybe they take half of the advice on board, or they don't want to put the work in between classes. There is a limit to what a trainer can do to help you if you don't take that advice on board. So basically, I think what I'm trying to say is, for me, the advice I give is because my heart's in it. My heart is there to try and help the dog and the owner have the best relationship that they can. It's not about ego for me. It's not about training with the best dogs or only working with owners that are going to compete with their dogs at high level. For me, my job is about helping an owner have the best relationship with its dog that it can possibly have. Do you want to add to that, John?
Yeah, there's nothing worse than if you have an owner comes to class and they've got the dog on the lead and the owner is close to tears. Yeah, they're getting so frustrated or wound up with this dog that they bought because they want to enjoy life with the dog, or they want to give their dog a good life, fulfilling life. But the dog is just bringing them to tears every single time. And fixing those kind of things is so much more rewarding than, as Claire said, teaching perhaps a naturally talented dog to get to a very high standard. So for us in particular, and it will change from trainer to trainer, but for us, it's about building a good relationship with the dog and the owner. There's a reason that you got a dog. Not many people buy a dog purely for a tool or purely to make them look good at competition. Most people, if you look up and down the country, will buy a dog because they want a pet, they want a companion, they want an animal that they can go out and have activities that they do together. That's their primary reason. So having that, and then finding that they haven't bought what they thought they bought,
that goes back to breed traits.
It's quite difficult for them. So sorting that out, so you get that relationship right, is always top of the list of things that we do.
Yeah.
And once they start to get that right, because the dog's being rewarded a lot more often, there's less that frustration, the dog's being rewarded more, you tend to find the behaviors are better. So as soon as you kind of chip into that and start get going, it becomes a self-rewarding process.
I think I see it a lot. I saw it actually in class this weekend. One client got really frustrated with her dog because it was making this mistake. And I had to get her to stop and just breathe. And I said, look, you're getting frustrated, so the dog then worries because the dog wants to get it right, but isn't getting it right, can sense that you're frustrated. And it was a vicious cycle. And we did the exercise after a little reset, and we did the exercise again, and it was perfect. And it was like, see the difference when you just relax, stop putting the pressure on yourself, stop putting the pressure on your dog, enjoy each other and learn together. The difference is incredible, really.
There's sort of like two sides of that as well, isn't it? Because like when we buy a dog, or most of us buy a dog, we buy it as almost a member of our family, but almost as a hobby. We want the dog to enrich our lives because most of us have crappy jobs, we have hard lives, having a family, having partners is always rewarding, but it can be hard work. And sometimes I know, like for me, going out to spend time with the dog is my way of decompressing from everything else in the world. If I go out and take the Cray twins together, that's even harder than when, like, whatever it is I'm trying to decompress from. So it can be incredibly frustrating if the basics are not instilled in a way where you can just simply go for a walk and the dog is well behaved. But on the other side of that, where you're saying like frustration when you're training, it's the same thing, isn't it? You're just breaking apart your relationship with your dog, not cementing it.
Absolutely. And I think it's always, as trainers, we don't have egos, dogs don't have egos, owners shouldn't have egos either. Everybody's journey is individual with their dog, and our job is to help that owner get the best out of that dog. We don't care if the dog makes a mistake in class. That's our job. That's what we're there for. So owners need to worry less and understand that the right trainer will care deeply about the relationship with you and your dog. And if they see you struggling, they will want to help you.
I think from the gun dog holiday, when I watched all the ladies there, we all turned up and we were so nervous and so focused and so stressed. And that morning, dogs were okay, but the dogs were like, obviously, like, why are you all so stressed? And where are we and what's going on? And as we all started to calm down, and I look at the photos that the photographer took, and in the morning we are like really serious people, and as the afternoon comes we start like smiling. By the second day we are all smiling, and everybody's like, oh, my dog's getting better, but everybody just relaxed into it, hasn't they?
Yeah, 100%.
Excellent. And what is our last thing that we want people to know in this podcast?
Your dog isn't deaf. If your dog isn't doing something, raising your voice isn't going to get them to do it anymore. They either don't understand what you want, they don't understand the context that you're asking for it in, they haven't performed that task enough in the environment that you're in, or you've taught your dog that they don't have to listen to you.
So this is like people going like, Ella, 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 rather than just realizing Ella's not listening.
Correct.
Yeah, I say to clients all the time, and I think I've said this in a couple of podcasts, so I'm not going to bang on because, you know, people are like, oh yeah, you said that before, Claire. But I literally say to people, if something goes wrong twice, change it. The same applies to if your dog ignores your voice twice, do something about it. Don't just stand there hollering, blowing your whistle, shouting commands, changing commands. As John said, the dog isn't, unless your dog is actually a deaf dog, your dog isn't deaf. They are either choosing to ignore you, or something's happened or something's happening in that moment where the dog is not able to or doesn't want to follow through, basically.
I find it really interesting with Rex, the new dog I have. He's not been taught to respond to vocal commands. He just responds to a whistle. So on the odd time that I'm stupid enough to go out without a whistle, I'll say to him, sit, and he's just like, what? And that dog will do anything on a whistle in a heartbeat. But when you vocally command him, because he's not used to it, he just doesn't get it. So that's a perfect example of what we're saying here is like, does the dog understand what you are asking it to do?
I wouldn't take it too seriously.
Okay, so that's our 10 things that we wanted to cover in this podcast. Before we end today's amazing podcast, is there any other things that you want to sort of add on, guys?
Extendable leads are great for measuring your curtains. They're not good for walking your dog.
This has got to be one of the best ones now. So, okay, explain a bit more, John.
When an extendable lead goes on a dog, it's not teaching the dog anything. It's just restricting them from being able to go outside of a particular radius.
They're also quite dangerous. I think it's important to say that the ratchets fail on them pretty often. I often read posts. Rachel Bean, she actually shared one where she had permission to share it about a dog whose ratchet had gone on the extendable line by a road, and the dog got run over. I mean, they're pretty dangerous, and they cause injuries to people's legs regularly as well. So from a serious perspective, they are quite dangerous.
They should have little markings on them, like a tape measure, which says, "This is a bit silly. Are you sure? Now things are getting stupid. And what kind of idiot are you? Your dog is in the next county."
What always frightens me is when, do you know, like if you're walking in open fields, okay, but when you're walking down the street and the dog comes around the corner and the dog still comes towards you, I'm like, where is the person attached to the dog? And then I'm thinking from my dog's perspective, I would never allow them to be able to get around that corner out of sight, because people are very quick to steal anything and your dog is away from you and you cannot see what's going on. So I think they almost encourage your dog not to be in contact with you, not to be checking in with you. Because if the dog's around the corner, he doesn't care where you are because he thinks you're at the other end of this lead. He's not checking in to see that he knows where he is or what's going on.
And there's always tension on them as well. It's the way they're designed.
I agree on this one. I feel now that this has gone a little bit like Room 101. So we've just chucked the Is there anything else we want to add?
Labradors are not meant to be fat.
I do agree with you. Society tends to encourage, but that idea of like give millions and millions of treats, make them a little bit like chubby. I think if you look at and I know it's a breed trait as well, but if you look at like a working lab and a show lab, we've talked about this before. Charlotte used to have show labs because she was part of the Young Kennel Club and wanted to do like obedience and heel work and all things like that. And she had this he was giantly, enormously fat, and we didn't feed him more than he needed. He was just a monster on a lead, right? And then when you look at a working dog, they're just a completely different breed, like setup and makeup.
I think that's the thing. It's the difference between fat and conformation, isn't it? And, breed conformation is one thing, but an overweight dog is bad for its health. So it's being realistic about it.
It's just that thing when the client goes, "Where's the Labrador?" So he's going to be, and actually no, the dog can only eat what you allow them to eat, or they exercise as much as you allow them to exercise. They're exactly the same as we are.
I got all excited when we neutered Buddy, which was, it was quite a few months ago now, wasn't it, Claire? I thought, because he'd always been a pathetic eater and quite excitable, high energy all the time. And I thought, when we neuter him, most dogs tend to put on weight. So maybe you could get a little bit more, just a nice covering so he doesn't look so scrawny on the back end. And he may calm down a bit. I hope it doesn't take his drive away. Neither happened. He literally has not put on a single ounce of weight, and he literally has still got this massive drive. And I think, again, those conceptions that would happen to all dogs, it doesn't, does it? Every single dog is different.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, John, have you got any other pearlers to pop in on the end on this? Claire's sitting there now, John. She has spent many, many years showing the whole group how beautifully lovely she is, genuinely beautifully lovely. And now you've come in and caused chaos, John.
I'll keep the last one to myself then.
No, go on, John. You might as well make us all giggle towards the end.
Milo is not a unique name. I've seen 17 of them this month.
But do you think they probably go through trends as well? Because
yeah, they do.
The amount of people I hear call him Buddy. I was somewhere the other day and I heard a lady with two cockapoos, I want to say they were, because they were a little bit furry. They were called Buddy and Ella, and I was just watching them and I was like, she called them Buddy and Ella, and I was just like, what is the chances?
Yeah, it is. You do get trends of phases of different names. Yeah.
It's always funny because obviously when you pick a name, you don't go, I want the most common name there possibly is. And you put a bit of thought into it, where that name's going to come from and what it's going to be. And then with most dog trainers that you take your dog to, they've seen hundreds of them that year. When
Megan was born, my youngest, it was when Transformers was really, really big. So I called her. Her name was either going to be Malia, which would have been quite different, Isabella, or Megan. Anyway, we settled on Megan. We were living abroad in Malta. There wasn't many Megans. We brought her back. She started school. There were 5 in her class. There were 5 Megans.
No way.
But I think it's definitely a trendy thing. So Milo is out, everybody, if you're listening. Anyway, that has been an amazing podcast. Thank you both for making our 52nd 1-year anniversary podcast fun and informative as always. If anybody wants to find you, Claire, and maybe you, John, where do they go?
The asylum's normally a good place to find me.
Website is www.familydogservices.co.uk. Family Dog Services also on Facebook and Instagram.
Fabulous. Thank you all for listening. We hope you've enjoyed. I hope you haven't been too put off by our expletive words, and I promise you we'll take it back to being very, very wholesome next week. I hope you've enjoyed the 10 tips and some more popped on the end, and we hope to speak to you all next week.
Thank you for listening to LWDG POD DOG with me, Joe Parrott. Now, we all know training a dog takes time, energy and patience, but our lives can be really, really busy. Don't worry, the LWDG has got you covered. Join us for our free planning workshop where we'll show you how to use short 10-minute training sessions each day to fast forward your dog's education. Our experts have years of experience in training dogs and will help you get started on the right foot. Register now and start making progress with your furry friend today. Go to our Facebook page, the Ladies Working Dog Group, and click on the pinned post, or visit www.thelwdg.com.